Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Net Zero Festival discussion about water, sustainability and net zero. I'm joined by Tom Reynolds from the Bathroom Manufacturers Association. Hi Tom.
Hi Joe.
And we've got Tim Pollard, sustainability expert and regular contributor to Installer. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing absolutely marvellously, Joe. Thank you.
Tom, can you give us a bit about your background and about the organisation, please?
Certainly. The Bathroom Manufacturers Association, as the name suggests, is the trade body for anyone that supplies bathroom fittings to the UK marketplace. So we have about 70 companies in membership representing over 100 brands, many of the most familiar brands to the installer base. And we are the voice of the industry. So we communicate on a very regular basis with government with focus on sustainability and on the compliance agenda.
Which is good. It fits very well in with what we're talking about today. And Tim, a bit about your background, please.
I'm Tim Pollard, and I now run my own business, Pollard and Pollard. I spent 30 years in the plumbing and heating industry, and for the last 15 years of my career with my previous employer, I was responsible for both the design, development and running of the Sustainable Building Centre, which highlighted and used all those sustainable products that we're talking about, and also attracted more than 20,000 trade visitors who came and saw for themselves just what it meant to lower impacts by using practical everyday products.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very impressive. When we talk about net zero, so we're doing the Net Zero Festival. When we talk about it, you find that we kind of get caught in maybe a bit of a trap about talking more about the heating side and the energy side. So you think a lot about hydrogen, you think a lot about heat pumps, but you don't necessarily think about the bathroom products and the showers and the water. You think more about the fuels and the heat systems themselves. But Tim, in your kind of experience, how big an issue is sustainability and net zero when it comes to water itself?
Oh, I think actually probably more important for many people. You know, when you look at the issues that are worldwide with water, there are already a sizable number of people who don't have enough water to survive, never mind, you know, the stuff that we use it for in the Western world. And that's only going to become more as we get changing weather patterns. Even here in the UK, the effect on water supply is going to be quite significant if we get extended periods of dryness, etc. And we've seen that over the last couple of years. We've seen hosepipe bans, etc., etc., etc. And we've also got the issue of what we do with water once we've used it, of course, with wastewater, etc. I think it's an absolutely crucial part. It's actually one of, I think, the most interesting parts as well, because you can do without all sorts of things, but without water, we die, frankly. Now, that sounds a bit dramatic, but it's true. And I think we've become rather water wasteful over the years. I always hark back to my youth, and I'm sorry, being an old git, you can't help but do that. We've actually increased our water usage by some 80% over the last 50 years. And that's because we've become used to daily showering, we've become used to running water, if you like. When I was young, we had a bath every week, whether we needed it or not, you know, and Sunday night was bath night. And we showered. So if you were third in, it was a bit grey, you know, but that sounds like a horror story now, doesn't it? But it's actually true. And we've become more demanding of water, and the pressure on water has now got to the state where in the south of England, there is less potable water per capita than the Sudan. Frightening, but true. And we're going to have to do something if we're going to get to the stage in 2050 where we've both tackled our issues with carbon, but also made sure that our livelihoods are sustainable in the longer term.
Tom, what about you then, as the Bathroom Manufacturers Association? This must be something that's very high on your agenda.
It is, and you know, I agree with Tim. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it, that in a country that's renowned for its wet weather and clouds and rain, that we're talking about water scarcity as a massive problem, but it is, and for two reasons. Firstly, despite the rainfall, we're facing what Sir James Bevan, the Chief Executive of the Environment Agency, calls an existential crisis within 20 to 25 years unless we address water scarcity. And that's because the cycles of more extreme weather that come with climate change. And the second reason is that for far too long, we've underplayed the carbon impact of using excess water. Put simply, water wastage equals extra carbon emissions that could be easily avoided. And just to kind of put that into a little context, the carbon footprint of potable water may be relatively small, about 30 grams of CO2 equivalents per 100 litres. But if you scale that up, a 10% saving on our water consumption would equate to about 100 million litres, 100 million tons, of carbon equivalent savings per day. So that's equivalent of taking about 57,500 cars off the road.
Wow.
Petrol cars. If you say that you're going to take the 27 million homes in the UK and bring them up to the same standard that's expected in new build within Part G of the building regulations, you'd save equivalent of taking 75,000 petrol cars off the road. So these are big numbers, but often underplayed.
Why do you think it is underplayed? Because, and again, I think it's an issue in the trade as well. As a trade magazine, when you start talking about net zero, you don't talk about the water. You don't necessarily equate it with like your members or shower manufacturers, but there's a lot of technologies, and we know that people are looking at this sort of stuff. So Tom, why do you think that is?
Oh, I think it's because the initiatives that we've had in government over a long time, things like the Green Deal, have focused on the sexier items like solar panels and cladding, insulation and boilers, the big ticket items. And you know, I think there is a move now towards thinking about things in the whole house and a package to actually achieve net carbon zero in the existing housing stock. But you know, there's still a hell of a long way to go on that, and I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, Tim, you've got a lot of experience with government and a lot of experience contributing to these papers and initiatives and things like that. So, what from your experience, water sustainability, water shortages?
I think again, just as Tom said, really, I think government always look for the most obvious things to tackle. Let's not forget that a lot of our water use is hot water use. You know, and if you're heating water, then there's a carbon implication somewhere along the line. And most of us, 30% of our heating bill, our gas bill, in most cases, is actually hot water. And if we can reduce our hot water, then we're certainly going to make an impact on it. The second thing, Joe, the sad thing, but the true thing, water's been cheap. Water's been too cheap, some would argue. So actually, the drive to save water has not been the same as the drive to save energy use, because energy is much more expensive, particularly electricity. And I think that's been one of the key issues, is helping people understand that the cost of water is not necessarily the upfront cost. It's the environmental impact and, of course, the long-term impacts, which are going to affect us over the years.
Yeah, a bit of taking for granted things, isn't it? Which, yeah, because when you start talking about stats like the lack of potable water, or the kind of years that we might get to where you start getting into water scarcity, you don't think about that as a first world country. It's not even on the average person's radar. But when you're thinking about things like when are we going to run out of fossil fuels and things like that kind of very much is. So Tom, there's lots of manufacturers and R&D, and they're creating these products in the bathroom that can help save water and can help minimize carbon. So what do you think, like in the here and now, that installers need to know about these products? Which ones do you think could make a difference right now to someone's home and business?
Well, a huge amount of water at the water saving agenda is about behaviour change, and there is just some simple things that people can do to cut their water consumption. An 8-minute shower can consume twice as much water as a bath, but a low pressure shower for just 5 minutes a day is a completely different story. And this behavior change is something which manufacturers are starting to factor in to the design and new products that they're bringing to market. So there's really interesting innovations coming out that harness behavioral ergonomics to put a timer on a shower, change the ambient lighting within the shower so that it indicates to the user that they're coming towards the end when they should be thinking about rinsing off and getting out. So there's lots here. When we talk about water shortages, something which sticks in the claw a bit is that 3 billion litres of water per day are lost through leakages in the network. This is before it even makes it into the home. But and this is something which the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament has issued a report on just this week, actually, Joe, where they really do take the water industry and DEFRA to task, saying that this is something you must deal with. But it would be churlish as the kind of manufacturers of water fittings and the installer base that's responsible for the end point if we said that we washed our hands, if you pardon the pun, and said that we don't have a role in this. We know we can do more. So there's those innovations coming to the fore. There's more innovations yet to be done around massive issues like leaky loos, where a leaking loo can waste 400 litres of water per day. We know we can do more about that, and installers have got a key role in ensuring that valves are correctly installed, for instance. But there's lots that can be done. We need to do that in partnership with all stakeholders, including government and the water industry.
Yeah, the behavioural aspect is really interesting because I was talking. This is secondhand information, so it might not be true, but hopefully it is. But I was talking to one of the big manufacturers the other day who said in Germany they shower differently. So they get in the shower, they turn it on, and they wet themselves, and then they turn it off, and then they kind of lather up, and then they turn it back on again. So they're designing products for that use, so it won't be very hot to start with, and it will the water will heat up at a sustainable way, ready for that kind of second bit. We've been talking a lot in the bathroom industry about things like bidets, which are big on the continent but haven't been adopted in the UK, and the toilets in Japan, which are a lot more smarter and all that sort of stuff. So Tim, behavioural change, which I know you've been talking about for a while, what can we do? What can installers do? What can the industry do to kind of address that?
Blimey, I must be German because that's the way I shower. But yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing, and this applies to energy as much as water, is that to educate people on where their water use is. A lot of people don't understand where their big water use. Even our own industry for many years said that toilet flushing was the biggest water use in a domestic property. But actually, for many people, it's showering. And showering is a good place to start because it is hot water as well. So you've got an impact both in terms of the water use and in terms of the energy use. And there's lots of products which are relatively simple to fit. Rated shower heads, even I fit with an rated shower head, and if I can fit it, believe you, anyone can. And where you can make really significant reductions in your water use with absolutely no change in the experience. And I think that's one of the things that people worry about with any environmental or sustainability aspect is, will it make my experience worse? Will it be wearing a sort of horsehair shirt, and it'll really not be a pleasure anymore. And for many people, showering is a pleasure. It's the way they rejuvenate themselves at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. So having a fantastically refreshing shower, and that's why people like powerful showers, but unfortunately powerful showers use a lot of water. So an aerated shower is a really nice, simple thing to do. And the thing that I did, and I did this, my water company offered me a free timer, like a little egg timer, which I stick on my shower wall, and that gives me 3 minutes. And I usually like to do it in less than half that. But there's a very simple way of producing something which actually I no longer need the shower timer, because when you get in the habit of doing it, then it disappears. And that's what behavior change is. It's changing our habits. It's making us do the right thing automatically without thinking about it. And toilet flushing is another one. Clearly, yellow is mellow. You don't have to shower. You don't have to flush every single time. And of course, the products themselves now offer either a dual flush or a very low flush. 4.2 litres is quite doable. Most UK installs are 7, 9, or even 13 litre. The old high-level flush, 20 litres, so 20 litres of water down every time you flush. So some really simple things. It doesn't have to be necessarily expensive. It doesn't have to be disruptive to make a difference.
Yeah, it's interesting when we're all like, let's not fill the kettle up the whole way through if we're only using a couple of cups of tea, but then we'll just have a shower for 40 minutes and completely undo all of that good work immediately. Tom, you mentioned government, and you mentioned government initiatives, and we know that the heating industry, there is a lot, the government pays a lot of attention to it. Things like net zero, there's a lot of attention being paid to it. As the kind of bathroom manufacturer side, rather than the kind of like heating manufacturer, boilers and heat pumps and all of that, how closely do you work with government, and are there any initiatives at the minute that installers need to know about?
Yeah, there certainly are. We've been talking a lot with the Department for, or DEFRA. I'm not going to repeat the full acronym because I'll be here all day.
Yeah.
But with DEFRA around water efficiency, and there was a consultation back in the winter around reducing domestic water consumption. Flowing from what we've just been discussing about behaviour change, part of that is around changing the behaviours during the buying cycle of homeowners purchasing of water fittings, and water efficiency labelling is a massive part of that. BMA a long time ago set up a water labelling scheme, which has morphed into a unified water label, which is a cross-European initiative. And this is something that we're talking to government about, how it fits into the UK's intentions for water efficiency after Brexit. We think it will have a key role, and one of the things that I would like to see installers doing is looking for the label, talking to their customers when they're scoping out jobs, and encouraging them to think about what sort of experience and what sort of water use they want when their products are installed.
Yeah, do you guys do any like an installer going in? They're used to that label now with because they're on things like fridges, but also because of the ERP, so they're on things like heating systems as well. It's very easy for lay people to understand, because I can look at it and go, band A green better than band D red. For an installer going into someone's house, would you like to see them take in maybe like some leave behinds with like information and things like that to educate the customer?
Yeah, and the benefits which you've described there for energy labelling, that's exactly what the water label does. So that this thing is ready, and certainly there's lots of online resources. There's lots of presence within the marketplace, but it could be greater presence. And certainly, installers should look for the label and encourage their customers to do so as well.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think? Things that you'd like to see government put in place, or things that you'd you think have worked in maybe another industry that we could adopt from this?
Well, number one, I am a keen fan of the water label, and I have some personal interest in that. I chaired the water using products group, where we actually spent a great deal of time in getting that introduced to most of the major suppliers in the UK. And I think that again is the issue. Is getting consumers to understand what the implications are of their decisions, and the fact that they can make decisions, as I just said before, which needn't necessarily be a bad thing. Everyone likes to do a good thing, okay? Everybody likes to do a good thing. And I think if we can all feel that we're making a contribution, even a small contribution, then it makes us feel better about it. And the installers can be a key part in that education process. When somebody says they want a shower and they want a powerful shower, if the installer can just explain how that can be achieved in a water efficient manner, that's such a big bonus, because we are inexpert buyers. In the public, we don't understand that. How many times do we buy one of these products? Not very often is the answer. We may look at the, Google and see what we can find out, but there's no one better than a fully qualified installer to convince us of the right things to do. And it's both a responsibility and a privilege of installers to have that position. And I often hear how they're nervous of doing that. They just want to do whatever the customer says. But actually, customers really value the experience of installers and some good advice. So I'd like to see much more empowerment of installers, and maybe even some incentive to help them to make that the right decision.
Yeah, it's interesting with bathrooms, isn't it? Because they are an aspirational room of the house. Like, we want them to look nice, and you can go on Instagram and you can look at, some of the plumbing hashtags, and they're just incredible. It looks like the front page of a magazine every time. Whereas, like, when you're fitting a heating system, it's not that attractive. It only matters when it's not working. So that's why it's more of a hard sell for engineers to sell more efficient products, because it's so driven by price. Whereas with a bathroom, maybe there's wiggle room for things because it's such an aspirational room in the house. What do you think to that, Tom?
I think you've really hit on something there, Joe. And one of the arguments that I've been making in some of the groups which are considering how we come back as an industry better from COVID-19 is that we need to harness the fact that kitchens and bathrooms are aspirational and the part of the home that people want to do up to actually get the whole house retrofit to achieve those really big net zero carbon benefits. Now, I've been in far too many meetings where bathrooms are treated as a bit of a frivolous accoutrement to the home retrofit, and that shouldn't be the case. We've already talked about the carbon benefits of a more water efficient installation, but actually, if that's the thing that motivates people to get that bigger project going, then that's something that we shouldn't fight against. We should work with and lean into it, exactly. And a case in point is there's been an announcement this week around the Green Homes Grant, and we wait to see with bated breath some of the detail on that. But I would be really, really upset if energy efficient taps and showers, which have been identified as key parts of the energy efficiency mix by bays, are excluded from that sort of grant.
Yeah, because if I don't think Green Deal had any of that in it, did it, Tim? Any bathroom stuff?
No.
But yeah, when you talk about it, if you talk about they've been in the news a lot recently, but like vouchers, like a bathroom sustainability voucher would be quite attractive to a customer. Do you not think?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I think it would definitely be would swing opinion. I think at the most crucial point, which is the buying cycle. I think also what we've got to try and understand is that customers are looking to lead the way, and in many cases, of course, families are a key part of that. Kids are now being taught these things at school. And I think that they could be a really interesting part of the decision-making progress, is to make sure that their parents are doing the right thing. Perhaps they could be the opinion leaders in the home as well.
One of the other things you wanted to talk about specifically, Tim, as well, wasn't it, was the packaging and the manufacturing process, and how we can streamline that as manufacturers, but also how installers can kind of help with that as well. Yeah,
definitely. The largest part of site waste is packaging. Now, this is a really big aspect, of course, as far as bathrooms are concerned, because many of the products are fragile, so they have to be protected in transit. But that like many other manufacturers, it could be possible to have packaging which is reusable, or certainly recyclable. And I think also one of my key learnings was one of the large detergent manufacturers looked throughout their process to see where they could make a difference. And actually, the biggest difference they could make was to make their product work at a lower temperature, which meant that when you put your washing powder in the washing machine, you could switch it down and you could run it at a lower temperature. I think we've got to be creative about our sustainability, you know, so we've got to be able to not look at perhaps the really obvious things, but to look at all those things which make up the carbon footprint of the product. And that includes delivery distance, it includes the method of delivery, and that certainly includes the packaging, there's no doubt about that. And also, one of my key interests is the circular economy. Can I take a product back at the end of its life cycle and reuse it in some way? The Dutch are leading many of these interesting areas. They actually call a building a future supply base, because you can take that building apart and use the products again. So I think we're going to be really creative in how we think about this. Yes, it's nice to look at the obvious things. How much water does it use? Can I stop that at the point of use? But also, what can I do before the product gets to the point of use? And what can I do after the product gets to the point of use?
Yeah, I know that this is happening because I went to a bathroom manufacturer, and they've managed to make their sinks and baths thinner, but as strong. So a lot of R&D has gone into this, but it means that they can use less ceramic. So less ceramic also means less water use in the manufacturing process, means less energy used in the manufacturing process. So you're getting like you mentioned earlier, the same product doing the same job to what you think it should do, but a lot of carbon and a lot of things have been saved in the background. Tom, how much is? Oh, sorry, Tim, carry on.
And we need to quantify that. You know, we need to be able to demonstrate that. It's not enough just to do these things. We have to shout about it as well. We have to make sure that people understand what we've done, and to help them understand how their purchasing decision would contribute towards that.
Yeah, and they look really good as well, and that's a good point as well, because you don't want it to be really functional and all the things we just mentioned, but it look a bit naff. But these look even better, and that kind of that design, a lot of that goes into like the research that they've done and the designers that they use. So Tom, how much for your manufacturers? How much is this on their radar?
Well, we held a sustainability forum just last week, actually, and there was a massive appetite for information and exchange of best practice on how manufacturers get better. I think Tim's question around and challenge around packaging is a really important one, and you know, if there wasn't already a very good moral reason for improving what we do here, there's soon coming a legal reason, in that the Environment Bill currently before Parliament is basically making, on a statutory footing, the producer pays for the disposal of packaging, something that we're going to have to deal with. The progressive bathroom manufacturers, many of whom are in BMA's membership, are already tackling this by doing free collection of packaging from site. By I can think of one particular company that by innovating and getting in some additional equipment on their production lines have removed 100% of plastic packaging in favor of cardboard packaging, for instance. So there's some great practice. We need to share it, exchange it, and make it more widespread. But there's going to be a legal imperative before too long. Yeah,
which suits like big new builds a lot, doesn't it? Because you're coming in with everything, and then all of that, instead of going to landfill, you can do things with it. But what about domestic engineers and plumbers that are going into people's houses? How can we incentivize them to recycle more? Is there any thoughts on that, Tom?
Well, that's a tough question.
That is a tough one. I didn't think that.
I think it's an extension of the same conversation. The installer is part of the supply chain to the end user, and we need to work with installers in order to ensure that there is a good circular economy going on within the bathroom industry, and there's all different ways that can be achieved.
So Tim,
I think, look, number one, we've got a supply chain in place which works downstream. can we not make that supply chain work upstream as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got a merchant who supplies the product. Will the merchant not take back the packaging or in some other way? I think that there definitely has to be some methodology in there.
Yeah, that would be really handy, because you could go to the merchant, as you said, get your kit for the job, go and do the job, put all the kit back in, go back to the merchants, hand that over, and then get the kit for the next job. That would make a lot of sense.
Exactly.
So, Tim, rounding up a bit now, what would your advice be to plumbers and heating engineers that want to kind of do more for sustainability and do more to kind of get on board with this net zero journey?
Okay. Well, again, I go back to basics. Understand where the biggest water use is. Understand what is possible within that. Listen to your customers. What's their expectation in terms of experience? And use your knowledge. Your knowledge is the key change medium for the customer. And don't be afraid of telling them where you think there's a great possibility without compromising on performance.
And what about you, Tom, from the BMA's point of view?
I think we all, as an entire industry, all through the supply chain, the installers need to shout loudly with one voice that plumbing and installation of great bathrooms are part of the drive for net carbon zero. You know, that is the big push. The government is applying all sorts of policy levers to achieving net carbon zero, its target being 2040. We need to awaken them to the fact that we're part of that solution. Otherwise, we're going to miss opportunities.
Yeah, I think wherever we talk about any of this stuff, it always goes back to the engineer. It's the people going into, especially on a retrofit, which is going to be the hardest nut to crack for all of us. But those people going into people's houses, they are the experts, and they have a lot of sway and a lot of knowledge.
Absolutely true.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Thanks a lot for your time, guys.
Joe, thanks very much for your time.